be a part of the revealing of His truth and of His word. So grateful to the Father to have had the opportunity to be a part of we had such a great fellowship on last Shabbat. Had an opportunity to have a little dinner afterwards, and did a good job too. And so it was really, really nice. And just looking forward to having that fellowship over and over again, at least once a month. And I'm hoping that once we get settled and get moved to the house, maybe we can just have that fellowship over the house. Since we'll be in Beaumont. Awesome. Just enjoy just a nice little, we have a space, availability to just enjoy nice little back porch out there. Just enjoy the beauty of the scenery and all that. Enjoy fellowship. And did it do as they did in the breaking of the bread of life and then the breaking of the bread in fellowship with one another, house to house. And so we look forward to having an opportunity to share. I'm wanting to continue in the reality and bringing forth the reality of how the walk of Torah, how it really, really does connect. It really, really does foster in our hearts the nature, the characteristic of the Father. And it produces something that the adversary does not have the capability to do. That is genuinely love. And as we look at this, I want to, again, before we go into Matthew, I want to get into Matthew chapter 5. But before I get into Matthew chapter 5, I really had to park for a moment and really talk about, as I started on last week, the reality of our hearts and how involved we must understand the reality of. I said it on more than one occasion that the Torah is a gift to us from the Father, and it is a gift to Him, to us, from Him to us, and it is the basis of His gift to us is His love for us, and because He loves us. Isn't it amazing that Yeshua is the Word made manifest? And John 3:16, of course, you understand, speaking in the reality of the Most High, that He loved, so He gave His Son. And when you think about that, what is it that prompts the Father to give whatever it is that He gives? It's His love. So in the same similitude that He so loved that He gave His Son, who is the Word made manifest, Torah made manifest, could we even suggest that the Father so loved us that He gave us His Torah? He gave us His instructions. He gave us the path of life. He gave, if we really are students of the Scripture, we find that the reference that Yeshua made to Himself when He says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the light, that exact same thing is applicable to the reality of Torah. Torah is the way, Torah is the truth, Torah is the life. So in the Father's love for us, sometimes we've seen that, I think historically, in some respects, as a separation, as a distinction, that out of His anger, out of His wrath, and out of his anger and bitterness, He gave us Torah. He gave us all of these rules and all these regulations. Then out of His love, He gave us Yeshua. No. it was one and the same. All of it was a gift as a result of his love for us. He loved us enough to give us that which would benefit us, that which would protect us, that which would help us, that which would redeem us. That is the reality. And so when we approach the reality of the story, we don't approach it with, oh, the burden of, oh, look at this. Oh, we approach it with the attitude and the heart of, wow, look what I get to do. I get to experience this gift that he's given to me in his Torah. So I really wanted to really look at the matters of our heart, because we really got to look at the reality of our heart. And I found some cartoons. I referred to one of these cartoons in our discussion on last week, and I found that cartoon. So happy I found it. Then as I found that one, I found some others that I think really brings home a point, and there's some things that we'll look at when we get into Matthew chapter 5. Because what I started to look at and see was that in Matthew 5, Yeshua, in a sense, gets to the heart of the matter. Says, I know you've heard it said, and I know it was taught to you, and you know this principle was taught to you, but if you look at some of the language of the things he was saying, in a lot of ways, it was almost as if man had taken, which they do all the time, had taken something that the Father had given, carved out, made their own version of it, and then presented it to people. And in a lot of ways, it kept a system, you can say, of control in place, where there was individuals who could control the people, in a sense, by giving them these altered instructions. Not really giving them the fullness and the reality of Torah, but giving them the altered version, and in some cases, a convenient understanding of Torah. We have to be careful with what we do, because this thing can be taken a multitude of ways. It can be taken where it is something that is perverted and it becomes strict, rigid legalism, bondage and captivity, and they can also become something that, you know, I've seen people in my own experience that have come into what they perceive to be the truth, and they come to a point where they end up denying Yeshua as Messiah. Dangerous thing to do when you get into that place, and we have to make sure. I believe with everything, with the Father of everything, that there is a balance to the reality. I believe it's important for us to understand that. And we have to understand how our hearts are involved in this matter. So I want to, just as we kind of go through, let's go real quick to Leviticus chapter 19. Let's start there today. Leviticus chapter 19. I really want to deal with it. I want to deal with specifically the reality of, because in some ways, Marcel, that they gave the altered version. One of the ways that they altered the understanding and perspective of things like vengeance. If you study in the scriptural text, you study in Torah, you will know that if a person had committed murder, we talked about this last week, if a person had committed murder, that was something, a person, individual that was would be earmarked by the family, that would be called the avenger of blood. And this individual will be responsible for exacting vengeance upon the individual who was responsible for the death of that particular family member. And then what they had was what they called cities of refuge, and these individuals could go into a city of refuge, and in some cases, you know, be safe from that avenger of blood. In a lot of ways, when they gave people the altered version of Torah, they set up a system by which there was a lot of anger, bitterness, hatred, and those sort of things like that. And so people even begin to use Torah. Like, I don't want to get into it too quickly, but just one example is we'll talk about when we talk about the reality of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Yeshua addresses this in Matthew chapter 5 when he talks about how that particular thing has been edited in a way to almost make them hate. We're going to talk about hate. minute. Because as we said on last week, when the Father is telling us to love our enemies, he's not telling us to trust our enemies. There's a difference, okay? Love and trust is two different things. I can love you and not trust you. So I must understand that whenever an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, you go back and read the principle as it was laid out, it was really still all about making sure that things were made right. It wasn't about exacting vengeance. It wasn't about you kill my cat, so I'm going to shoot your dog. You know, it wasn't that at all. You know, it was all about the Father managing those relationships between one another. You know, if it fell into the reality of doing to other people that which you would want done to you. And so it never, but the Father never, ever, 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 ever in his Torah would have given the outlet for human vengeance, human justice, if you will, in a sense. Because he always told his people, you know what? I will give you instructions, but vengeance is mine. I will take care. Let me make it right. You've been, I think it was in the book of Amos, I want to say. He's talking to the people, says, you guys have been victimized, this, you want justice. Let me do it. I got it. All right. So anyway, let's look at Leviticus chapter 19, and let's look at verse number 17. Look at this principle. We have to look at, y'all, that what we must understand is we cannot operate, and I'm going to reiterate this point, we cannot operate in both love and hatred. Can't do it. It's impossible. But we want to look at the reality of where hatred comes from, and there's some things that I'm reviewing in a sense because the Father just brought it back to me and says, "I need you to do it again." There's something to repetition, and so I need you to take a look at that again. Let's look at this real quick. Leviticus chapter 19, verse number 17. Look at that particular verse. Of course, I always tell people to read the whole thing in context, so you know I'm not telling you something out of context. But Leviticus chapter 19, verse number 17. Let's start there. Look at that. Do not hate your brother in your heart. That's something. Wait a minute, let's back up real quick. Let's back up. Let's go to verse number 15. Do not be unjust in judging. Show neither partiality to the poor, nor deference to the mighty, but with justice judge your neighbor. In other words, social status, financial status, class should not play a role in justice. I talked about this one time before when I taught a message about justice. And in the secular system, secular world, they say justice is blind. And I get what they're getting at when they say justice is blind. But when you look at the reality of how the Father does it, no, justice is not blind. He sees everything and knows everything. Justice is very clear, you know. And when I studied justice, I studied and discovered that the Father's thought concerning justice is a lot different than what we've known justice to be. When he says, you know what is expected of you, seek justice, love mercy, welcome. What he's saying when he says seek justice is he's first saying seek to do right. You can look at in this original context, seek to do right. Seeking justice first means I want to be guilty of doing right. And then once I am guilty of doing right, then that means that my cause and my case can be pleaded before the Father and before the Most High. But watch this, I can't ever justify at any point in time, not because of my position, not because of my role, not because of my title, not because of privilege in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I can never justify doing wrong. And this is what I believe. I believe wholeheartedly that at no time, at no point, in any way, in any shape, form, or fashion, should we ever side with wrong. Wrong should always be wrong. I don't believe in relationships, family relationships, any of those kind of relationships at all, I don't believe we uphold one another in wrong. I don't believe that. I don't believe the Father ever wants us to do that. You never get on the side of wrong. Because if you ever get on the side of wrong, no matter who it is, it's always going to be wrong. Okay? But he says, so in other words, he's not telling his people not to judge. That's the other misconception. We get to what is it, Matthew chapter 7? Judge not, lest you also be judged. He's not ever telling them not to judge. He's telling them how to do it. Even in that chapter, he's telling them how to judge, right? When you get to the part where he says that you have a beam in your eye, and there's a speck in your brother's eye, and he tells them, first get this out of your eye. See, you can't judge the matter until your seeing is clear. Then once you get that out of your eye, then you help people. Don't let him keep the speck in his eye either, right? But when we're talking about judging is never me judging your life by my life. Amen. Me judging you by me. Because as I've said before, none of us are the standard. What we have to understand is that there is a standard that the Father has set that's outside of all of us. And when we deal with judging the matter or judging the behavior, we judge the behavior of the person, but we don't pronounce the final sentence over the person. Sometimes we're guilty of that. Or no, we don't pronounce. I judge the matter that is before us and say that's wrong. And the reason I say that's wrong is because the standard says it's wrong. So it's never me judging you based on me. It's always all of us looking at the standard and saying, do we meet? Do we measure up? Is this in alignment with what the Father said? That's how judging among one another should be done. Okay? And sometimes we don't realize the difference between being judgmental and being critical. We'll understand sometimes between conviction and condemnation. Because sometimes we heap condemnation upon people, and condemnation is not a tool that the Father ever used. He does not use condemnation. Condemnation comes from the wicked one, and it comes from a sin nature that we have. Conviction comes from His Spirit. And when conviction comes, then there is something that can be done. When there's a conviction that takes place, then that we fall upon the mercy of the court. Right? Something can be done with conviction. Condemnation means I'm eliminated, rejected, thrown away, cast out. So the Father does not use condemnation, but conviction is essential. All right? So he says, in verse 15, do not be unjust in judging, neither show partiality to the poor nor deference to the mighty, but with justice judge your neighbor. Do not go around spreading slander among your people, but also do not stand by idly when your neighbor's life is at stake. I am the Most High. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Let's establish the reality that the Father is not okay in any form of fashion or shape with hatred being held in our hearts toward people. No form of it. No form of it. I remember when these things were stirring up, and you guys remember in recent history when things were stirring up, and you had these groups of people that were going around, and they were tearing down the statues of the Confederate statues, monuments, and all this kind of stuff like that. Now, understand this: I do not support the vandalism of property. And so, as I'm meditating, I'm looking and I'm seeking the Father, and I'm asking him. I said, Father, what is a perspective? What is a proper perspective, that we should have on this whole matter? And from that, he birthed in me, and I did a Facebook live message on it, and it was called "The Idols of a Nation." And he began to share with me the reality of the nature of idolatry. One of the reasons why he told us to stay away from idolatry is because idolatry produces all these kinds of affections for things that affection should never be for. And what he revealed to me is if we really did it his way, we would have no statues of anybody. No statues of anybody, no statues of anything. We would understand that the only one who should be glorified and praised and honored would be him. There would be no monuments to tear down. But if we seek to tear them down, then all of them must come down. That's the reality, right? If we just did it the way he did it, did he not tell? Don't create. What that stuff came out of other different cultures, Greek culture and all this different culture, creating all these gods and all these idols and all these different things for us to use upon and look upon and to worship. He said, no. If it was done the way I said for it to be done, what you're looking at is you're looking at the remnants and the results of idolatry. We idolize people, we idolize moments, and we idolize heritage, and we idolize. If we just remove all the idols out of our hearts, there will be no idols for us to look at, for us to be so offended by. It's the reality. Yeah, there's no, and one idol is no different or no special or no more precious than any of the others. But what happens is mankind, idolatry is in the heart of mankind. And because idolatry is in the heart of mankind, this produces all of these different things. So now here we are, people and individuals who really should be coming together, who really should be loving each other, who really should be following after the heart and the plan of the Father. Here we are arguing over monuments and statues that should not have ever been erected. Hallelujah, that's the truth, y'all. I saw it, and he made it very clear to me. It's idolatry. Let it all go. Mm-hmm. It's just very clearly, you don't need a banner. That's me. And I refer to as Yahweh Nisi. I'm the banner. And he says, yeah, it's the things we see that we don't understand, that it's rooted in idolatry. And I'm gonna tell y'all the reality, y'all. You cannot be guilty of idolatry and not also be guilty of hatred. The root of hatred is idolatry. Because at the root of idolatry, one of the reasons why the Father hates idolatry is because idolatry really is all about the worship and exaltation of ourselves. That's the reality, y'all. Idolatry is rooted in the worship of God. That's why I keep saying your greatest example is every idol looks like the people that's worshiping it. Buddha looks Asian. Why? Because it's almost like redirecting the worship of myself upon that image. People take their image and put it upon something else that they didn't worship. The root of it is really the worship of yourself. The same thing that was in Hasatan, the same thing that was in Satan, that wanted to exalt himself above the Father. Yes, there are other entities that are associated that get involved in your worship of this idolatry, but at the end of the day, idolatry really is the worship of self. And sometimes we do that with our identity and with our culture. We exalt our identity and our culture above Father himself. But if we all ambassadors represent the kingdom, we all come into one kingdom, we all have one Father. That's the truth, y'all. And I believe that's what we should be communicating as ambassadors of the kingdom, the representatives of the kingdom. No, that's not a part of us. Let that be something that exists in the world. Let that not be something that exists among us. We have the answers here. And that's why I say it's so dangerous for us for people to have ignored and taken away and saying stuff like, Torah was not for us now. That's why it's dangerous to have done that, because you've taken away all these different things that he gave us as guidelines for us to live our life by, right? You can't tell me, oh, I don't need Torah because I have Holy Spirit. Well, if you have Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, guess what? One of his responsibilities is to bring back to your remembrance what has been commanded, to inscribe upon our hearts right? That was his responsibility as prophesied to Jeremiah. I'll write it in your hearts and in your minds, my Torah, right? So when the guys told me, oh, well, I don't know what you're saying, man, you kind of need to look, because we're not under the law. I said, well, here's the reality. If we want to say we're not under the law, okay, fine, we're not under the law. But you don't have to be under something that's in you. If it's in me, but anyway, so let me keep reading. I'm getting excited. It says, do not hate your brother in your heart. Watch this. But rebuke your neighbor frankly. Now, rebuke is essential, but watch this, y'all. Even rebuke should not come out of hatred. I believe that rebuke, the nature and the purpose of rebuke, even when rebuke happens, it should be something that is motivated out of my love for the individual, that I don't want to see that individual walk into something that is detrimental or harmful. That even the rebuke is not about me. It's not about my selfish. Because sometimes I've seen people be rebuked, but I've seen that people have been rebuked out of the arrogance and pride of the other individual who's doing the rebuking. And you can feel the sense. It's not coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of the love and care and concern that we have for the individual. It is coming out of a place of a selfish, negative emotion is where it's coming from. And so it comes out in that heart and in that spirit. It comes out in that manner. I really believe that rebuke really has to do with bringing the person's focus and alignment back to the reality of the truth of the word for their own good and for their own protection, for their benefit. It's about helping the individual, okay? Not about alleviating my irritation. Because if it's coming from a place of alleviating my irritation, that's the flesh. That's not Holy Spirit. So he says, rebuke your neighbor frankly. Watch this. So that you won't carry sin because of him. Don't dance around and leave it the issue. Alts are something that should always be settled. They should never linger. Right? So he says, don't hate your brother. I found out the word brother in Hebrew. The word brother means strong fence. Strong fence. The Hebrew word means strong fence. But when I studied the word hate and the word enemy, they because what I found out is there's more than one word for hate in Hebrew. And whenever you look at stuff like the father saying, Yaakov or Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, that particular sense of hated did not mean a strong dislike for Esau. All right. In some cases, in some connotation, hate in this sense, as it relates to the person that I'm at all with, is the Hebrew word oyev. Okay? It's the Hebrew word oyev. And what this actually means, hated. So whenever a person is described as my enemy, okay, that means, or this person is either a hater or this person is hated. That's the sense. Sometimes I started using the language years ago. People who have decided to make themselves an enemy. Because there are times where people just choose to be on that side of the reality. But if we have the right heart, then we do not allow the behavior of that individual to influence what we do or don't do, what we say or don't say. The only thing that governs us, and man, when we get in Matthew chapter 5, we're going to see, The only thing that should govern us consistently is the leading of Holy Spirit and the instructions that we have in His Word. That's the only thing that should ever guide what we do. Our emotions should never guide us. Our emotions should never direct us. Nothing else should ever lead us except Holy Spirit, who gives us discernment, and the understanding we have of the truth of His Word. Okay? Because here's what I've learned about the word enemy. The word enemy, means, where is the Father? And that's something. Where is the Father? When we understand the word Father in Hebrew, Abba, okay, the word Abba in the Hebrew means strong authority. So here we have the absence of strong authority. This is what is causing this friction, this interaction between these individuals. See these terms, look at these family terms that they use, brother, father. When there is this ought between us as brethren, when there is this unforgiveness, this bitterness, this whatever that exists between us and our brothers, you gotta know that the question is being asked. Where's the Father? And we talked about love, the Father revealed. So the Father is revealed through love. If the Father is revealed through love, who is revealed through hatred? That's something to think about. Hatred is the opposite of love. And if the Father, means the Father revealed, then what is hatred revealing? Whose nature is hatred revealing? Where is hatred, bitterness coming from? It's important for us to understand, y'all. So go to Proverbs Chapter 10 real quick. Because what we're going to find is, my goodness. Let me make that correction. Though. That's the word enemy is oh yeah. The word enemy is oh yeah, which means, where's the Father? Where is the strong authority? Okay. Concealing hatred in our hearts produces sin. It produces error. It stirs foolishness. Proverbs, look at Proverbs Chapter 10. Look at verse number 9. Boy, I love the book of Proverbs. Whew. Proverbs chapter 10, verse number 9 says, he who walks purely walks securely, but he who walks crooked in ways, he who walks in crooked ways will be found out. He who winks his eye instead of rebuking causes pain, yet a babbling fool without trouble. So he's not saying that I let the wrong go by, right? Whenever the rebuke becomes necessary. So whenever the wrong happens, whatever it takes place, I need to rebuke. I don't wink at it and act like it didn't happen. That's not the way to do it either. He says, the speech of the righteous, verse 11, is a fountain of life. The speech of the righteous is a fountain of life. We know what the passage says. What does the mouth speak from? Out of the abundance of what? Heart. The mouth speaks. At some point in time, whether we try to hide it or whether we try to sweep it under the rug or whatever, at some point in time, the mouth is going to reveal the heart. So if I have something embedded in my heart, it's going to eventually come from my mouth. Just this. Verse 12 says, hate does what? Stirs up disputes. The dispute is a byproduct of hatred. Love does not produce disputes. Okay, let's look at the screen here. This is here, right? We got these behaviors, these characteristics, this nature of love. We got fruit of spirit, all these different things like that. We look at this list right here. It says, love is patient and kind, not jealous, not boastful, not proud, rude, or selfish, not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs, does not gloat over other people's sins, takes delight in the truth, always bears up, always trusts, always endures, never ends and never fails, according to the King James. Where do we see love creates dispute? It does not. Hatred stirs dispute. A lot of times you'll find hatred, bitterness. You know the word, when you study the word bitterness, chaos, those words are hand in hand. They're almost one and the same. The bitter man in the Hebrews is called the chaos man. Okay, that Mim is involved in the whole. He's a chaos man. He's angry. He's bitter. He's rebellious. Right. So let's finish reading. He says, "Hatred stirs up disputes, but love covers all kinds of transgressions." Love doesn't cover up, but love does cover. Okay. So he says, on the lips of the intelligent is found wisdom, but a stick is in store for the back of a fool. Wise people hide their knowledge, but when a fool speaks, ruin is imminent. That's one thing I've even learned about wisdom. One thing I said the Father revealed to me about wisdom, Brother John, is that wisdom is always speaking, but it's not always talking. It's not always verbal. Wisdom is always speaking. It's always there, always causing discernment, always causing discretion, always got this byproduct of wisdom. But I've learned that people who are truly wisdom don't ever try to prove how wise they are. I've learned that. He says, the wealth of the rich is his fortified city. The ruin of the poor is their poverty. The activity of the righteous is for life. The income of the wicked is for sin. Wow. He who observes discipline, verse 17, is on the way to life, but he who ignores correction is making a mistake. So rebuke and correction, all those things are necessary and essential. They help us to grow, they help us to develop, they help us to be better. Watch this, y'all. This is really what I'm trying to get to. He who covers up hate has lips that lie. And anyone who slanders is a fool. When words are many, sin is not lacking. So he who controls his speech is wise. The tongue of the righteous is like pure silver, but the mind of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for their lack of sense. Proverbs also tells, the writer of Proverbs also tells us that anger, the King James Bible says it like this: anger resteth in the bosom of fools. And when anger sits there, I have learned it is impossible to harbor anger and not sin. If I harbor anger in my heart, if anger, bitterness, the root of anger and bitterness is in my heart, I am going to sin. And this is what's going to happen. I'm going to then justify my sin by saying I'm within my rights too, right? This is what we do. We justify our sin. But the reality is that I must understand how my heart plays a role in what I say and what I do. We've been told, guard your heart with all diligence, because out of your heart comes everything you say and everything you do. You did it because it was in your heart first. Something got in your heart that made you do what you do or say what you say. Right? So it becomes important for us to understand the nature of the reality of what's happening or what's going on in our hearts. And we got to learn to guard our hearts. Well, I'm going to get to that in just a moment. We've got to learn to guard our hearts. We've got to guard our hearts from hatred. Now, before I move on from that point, I need to look at real quick, let's stay there in Proverbs, flip over to chapter number 8. I need to look at the reality of what it is that we need to hate, because there are some things that we need to hate, right? Hatred is not for people. Amen. Hatred is for things. Amen. Right? The psalmist in Psalm 119 says, because I love you, I'm paraphrasing, because I love your Torah, I hate every false way. Right? So watch this. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 8, verse number 12. Wisdom, live together with caution. I attain knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Most High is what? Hatred of evil. I hate pride and arrogance. In other words, what I should learn to do with Torah is in my heart. It teaches me to love how he loves and hate what he hates. That's what happens in my heart. So he says, I hate pride, verse 13, I hate pride and arrogance, evil ways and duplicitous speech. Good advice is mine and common sense I am. Insight, power is mine. By me kings reign and princes make just laws. By me princes govern, nobles too, and all the earth's rulers. I love those who love me, and those who seek me will find me. Now this is wisdom speaking to us, right? Now, of course, we understand all this is connotation directly right back to the Bible. But the reality is, y'all, when we're talking about the reality of the nature of wisdom, where does wisdom come? The fear of the Most High is the beginning of wisdom. When I'm to the point where I submit myself to the one who knows everything, you know, to say, I don't know anything. I need you to show me, to guide me, to direct me. I need the interest of your word to give light and bring understanding to the simple. I need your word to be the lamp to my feet, the light to my path. I need your word to be that which gives me the guidance and the direction to guide my feet. So he says, verse 17, I love those who love me, and those who seek me will find me. Riches and honor are with me, lasting wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, fine gold. My produce is better than the finest silver. I follow the course of righteousness along the paths of justice. That's what true wisdom does. I'm not talking about earthly sensual wisdom. I'm talking about true wisdom that comes from above, revealed to us by the Father. That wisdom follows the course of righteousness along the paths of justice, to endow with wealth those who love me and fill their treasures. I was listening to a video where this gentleman was talking about the 7 spheres of wealth, and he said something that made it was so true. He said that you will never really, we're not talking about going on the world's terminology. You never really come to the place where you experience the true reality of wealth until you are wealthy spiritually first. That is where the Father really wants us to get to the place where we understand we're not talking about material, we're talking about spiritual wealth. Right? Because we're talking about spiritual wealth, the moths can't get to it. Rest can't get to it. Right? That's why he says our affection should never be for things below. Our affection should only be for things above. Right? Because we keep saying things were made to be utilized and managed. People were made to be loved. So we love people, we use things. We don't do it the opposite way that this culture does. Love things and use people to get things. That's the flip of what the Father intended From the very beginning, when the Father created things, what did he told us to do with the things? Have dominion, subdue, manage those things. I gave you the things to manage. Love the people. Don't have an affinity and an affection for things. This culture teaches people an affection and affinity for things. So much so, today will hurt people that they should be loving to get things. They will steal from people to get things. Wow. So he says, verse 21, to endow with wealth those who love me and fill their treasuries. The Most High made me as the beginning of his way, the first of his ancient works. I was appointed before the world, before the start, before the earth's beginnings. When I was brought forth, there was no ocean depths, no spring, no. So from the very beginning, wisdom from the very beginning. The wisdom of the Father from the very beginning. Do y'all understand that the wisdom of the Father is revealed to us in his Torah? That out of his wisdom, he gave us instructions for how we ought to live to protect us. I'm telling you, there's things he said. If you look at everything he said to stay away from, it is everything he said not to do. Do you understand that when he's telling me not to do a thing, his goal is to protect me from the consequences of that action? That's his goal, not to control me. He's like, now, I'm going to tell you not to do this. Now, you have a choice to do it or not. But I'm telling you, if you do it, you're not going to like the consequences of what you did. That's the reality. Behold, I said before you death and life, blessed the curses, therefore choose life, that you and your seed may live. Choose life. You're choosing life when you choose obedience. When you choose to obey him, you are choosing life. When you choose to disobey him, you are lessening not only the quantity, but you are lessening the quality of your life when you choose to disobey. The quality of your life is going down when you choose to disobey him. Wow. I would not be guilty as Esau and be willing to trade birthright for instant gratification. That's what he did. Traded Jehovah. We give Yaakov, we give Jacob a hard time. But Jacob understood what birthright was. Jacob understood completely what it was. He understood. Esau just wanted lentil stew in the moment. He wanted to eat right now. Well, you have the capability to hunt. But because he's being impetuous and impatient, he gives up his birthright. He gives up his birthright for a bowl. Think about that for a minute. Okay, let's keep reading. Psalm 45 and 7. Let's hit that real quick. Oh, when I tell people I love them, it's because I do. I love people. Psalm 45, look verse 7. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy in preference to your companions. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, your God has anointed you with the oil of joy in the presence of your companions. Listen, man. Unrighteousness produces so much trouble. It produces so much trouble for us. And the reality is we don't see it until we are deep into our righteousness. We don't see it. It produces so much trouble. But if you could just make the decision to obey him, then I realize there's some things I just don't have to experience. There are some things I watch people with. I I don't ever have to experience certain things. You know what? I saw that happen to you. It's not for me. I just understand that obedience is the best way to go. The best way to go. All right. All right. Let's look at one more passage here for what should be hated. Look at Psalm 97, verse number 8. Zion hears and is glad. Most High, the daughters of Yehuda, rejoice at your rulings. For Elohim, Most High over all the earth, you are exalted far above all gods. You who love Adonai hate evil. Now, that's what I hate. I hate evil. I hate wickedness. And the reason why I hate it is because I know what it does to people. I hate unrighteousness. I hate arrogance. I hate pride because I know what it does to people. I know what it's doing to the individual who is involved in it. Watch this, y'all. So he says, verse 10, you who love Adonai hate evil. He keeps his faithful servants safe. He rescues them from the power of the wicked. Light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright in heart. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous, and give thanks on recalling his holiness. The reality, I hate wrongdoing. I hate when anybody is done wrong. I hate it. Right? We have to learn to love what he loves. And we have to learn to hate what he hates. He makes it clear what he hates. And he makes it clear why he hates it. If I have his commands in my heart, then I understand why he's telling me that I have to make sure that I walk in the truth of his ways. The word truth. The Hebrew word is emet. Truth, emet. It is Aleph Mem Tav. When I studied the trail of where it led me, I almost fell off my seat because when I studied the trail of where it led me, truth was billed as because the word mem, the word emet starts with the same word as for mother, Ema. And the heart of a mother is to nurture. We talk about the tithe, we talk about the covenant. So the truth is what nurtures the covenant. Right? Anything that is nurtured grows and produces, and right, gets bigger, gets stronger, is more fruitful when it's nurtured. That's the purpose of nurturing. Right? That's what I'm learning to do with my plants. You nurture them because as you nurture them, you are giving it what is essential and necessary to produce, to grow, to get the maximum benefit out of it. Ooh, so why does the Most High want us to worship him in spirit and in truth? Because he wants us to actually be able to walk in that which nurtures covenant. It's a reason why, if you look at the script, there's a connection between grace and truth. Don't give me grace without truth. Because if you try to give me grace without truth, you're not going to give me the truth about grace. So give me, Yeshua says, when in Matthew, in Yochanan chapter 1, he says that he manifested, and when he manifested, it says that he was full of grace and truth. Grace and truth must always, they're always connected. Right? Remember I told you, it's almost like when you look upon this tallit, and you look upon these taliphim, it is always to remember, it's always to remind. Now, most of them are made where these strands are both blue and white. Okay? Those cords are blue and white. They're intertwined, they're intertangled. They're intertwined and intertangled these knots. Right? Because you have a representation of both his promises and his commands. You can't separate them. They're intertwined, they're intertangled together. His commands and his promises are one and the same. Old salvation is free, not for him, but for us. But you must understand that the reality of the covenant is conditional. Love is not. But the reality of the manifestation of the benefit that we have in our life is because when we decide to walk in obedience to him, he rewards us for our obedience. That is the reality of the matter. No, I'm not talking about works to attain righteousness. That's Yeshua. That was what Yeshua did. He did that. He accomplished that. I'm talking about works because of righteousness. That now that I have been made righteous, just like when I was unrighteous, I did the works of darkness. I worked the works of Satan, right? Worked the works of the course of this world, right? Charles says, you once followed the course of this world, you couldn't help it. But now that we have a covenant with the Most High. Now, just like that was the works of Satan, now I'm working the works that he has provided, that he has set forth, good things that he has set forth for me to be able to do. Right? What we see Romans chapter 12, Shaul is begging, I beg you, I beseech you, brothers, by the mercy of the Most High, that you present your body as a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto him, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove, demonstrate what is a good, perfect, and acceptable will. All attributes of the reality of his will in this Torah. Good, perfect, and acceptable. Yaakov tells us, James tells us that the Torah, the law of the Most High, is perfect, converting the soul. That when I receive his instruction and I begin to embrace and apply the reality of his instruction, it influences my life to a great degree. So I've got to learn how to guard my heart with his truth. I'm almost finished. I want to show you this cartoon. Y'all see it. Just look at that for a minute. I think this cartoon captures really a good essence. In the cartoon, you talk about on the hook says, look, I know they did you wrong, but you really ought to forgive them for your own sake. And out of her mouth, she's saying, oh no, I'm not letting them off the hook. But if you look at the picture, who's really on the hook? She's on the hook. Now, forgiveness and bitterness, you see that heading? Bitterness of the heart deceives. Because somehow I think I have the upper hand as long as I can be upset and mad with you. Somehow I feel like I'm doing something about it. But really, I'm not doing anything about it but harming myself. They're not on the hook. She's on the hook. Here's the thing. This worldly mentality that our culture has taught us to believe that because I walk away, it means they get away. That is so like, that demonstrates a lack of the trust. Bitterness, anger, unforgiveness, those things demonstrate a lack of trust in the Most High. You do not believe that he's got your best interest in heart. You don't believe it. You believe you have to do something about it because either you don't trust him or you're just operating clearly in rebellion in your own way. It's truth. But if I understand what he's telling me to forget, wait a minute. What is the whole idea of forgiveness anyway? Okay, is forgiveness for the people who've not done you wrong? Who is forgiveness for? Evidently, it's for the people who done you wrong. We got his instructions that tell us how to do it. Then we just read in Torah, Leviticus chapter 19, where he says, don't hate your brother in your heart, verse 17. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Don't harbor that hatred in your heart, because if you harbor that hatred in your heart, you're going to sin. Right? When we look at that passage that people sometimes use to justify what the Bible says, be ye angry and sin not. Yeah, but it also says if you keep on reading, that same verse tells you not to hold on to your anger. Because if you hold on, when he said be ye angry and sin not, he's really telling you, pay attention. When you see that the anger is there, deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, you are going to sin. You are going to do something outside of the will of the Father. James says, the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of the Most High. And if I do what I do, motivated out of my wrath, motivated out of my anger, motivated out of my bitterness, motivated out of my unforgiveness, the Father does not smile upon that, and he is not on my side. And he is not okay with it. And he is not going to help me get them, because he's not going to become my hitman because I have hatred in my heart. I got to identify the reality when hatred and unforgiveness. Sometimes you can see it in people. It's like, man, you don't see that there's a complete difference between the way you treat that individual, the way you treat that individual. It's clear. You don't see that you're harsh here and light. You don't see it. It's there, right? Discernment makes it very, very clear. It's there. Yes, it's clear. You don't know why? Because this is why we talk about the heart, the mouth revealing the heart, but your everything about you reveals your heart. That's why it says guard your heart with all diligence. The Hebrew talks about the fact that what is in your heart produces the consequences of what happens in your life. Your words and your actions are influenced by what is in your heart. It's the truth. Whatever is in your heart in the moment, it comes out in your actions and in your words. Sometimes what we do is we almost like ignore, and then we almost justify, oh no, it's not. No, it is. No, it is. Your actions and your words are revealing your heart. It's the truth. You can't hide your heart. Pharaoh's heart was hard. What did he do? Okay, check this one out. This one I thought was like, wow. Look how deceitful the bitterness of heart is. The heading says, forgive and be forgiven. She says, look at what you did. You spilled ice cream on my shoe and you expect me to forgive you? And look at the mom behind her, excuse me? Now you are railing at him for spilling ice cream on your shoe and saying you can't forgive him. Yet if you just pay attention to what you've done, you've also spilled ice cream on somebody's shoe. This is that picture of forgive so you can be forgiven. Because just like you saw that and that offended you, how many times have we offended the Father? How many times have we needed his? How many times did we not deserve for him to forgive us? So the reality is, y'all, me forgiving, I'm not even gonna say not forgiving. Me forgiving is rooted in the reality of I never lose perspective on how much I have been forgiven or need forgiveness. I don't ever lose sight on that. Because if I realize I need to forgive you so that I can be forgiven, because just like this mom is watching her deal harshly with the young man for doing the same thing that she's done. This is exactly how the picture looks. The Father is watching what I do. Y'all remember the parable? You remember the parable that Yeshua told and said the man went before the king and he owed a huge debt, right? And when he owed this huge debt, he went before the king and the king forgave him. And there was witnesses to seeing how the king had forgiven him for this huge debt. He goes and sees on his way and sees individuals who owe him less than what he was just forgiven of. And then turns around and has those people thrown in prison. And the Father says, Yeshua says, he was brought back before the king, and the king was like, you're wicked. Why could you not forgive? I just forgave you a huge debt. No wonder Yeshua teaches us when he tells us, when the disciples asked him to teach us to pray, no wonder he says, clause, forgive us as we forgive. Give us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. You know what it's saying? It's saying, do me like I do other people. Forgive me like I forgive other people. I don't want to be guilty of harboring hatred in my heart for anybody, for any reason, at any time. And I'll tell you something, Brother John. I said this on last week, and I'm repeating it because it's true. I have started to really see the more the Father's Torah is becoming alive in the reality of my heart, the less offended I am. Things offend me a whole lot less because His Word is really at work, right? He says that one of the things that happens is He takes out the heart of stone, puts in the heart of flesh. He's something that that's usable. I'm less offended by things, right? Because what is happening in His Torah is shaping the reality of my perspective. And sometimes I understand that because of the condition of sin, sometimes this is all people have. And sometimes I'm not surprised by the behavior that people exude. Like what happens in my heart as I start to feel pity for them. That, I wonder sometimes in my heart, like, how can I be of benefit to help that individual change that perspective or change that about themselves? How can I, engage it in that way? How can I reach them where maybe their hearts and their minds can change? They can turn away from that behavior and turn away from that. Best way for me to do it is to be a demonstration of Torah. To demonstrate to them what love looks like, in spite of you. Boy, we get to Matthew 5. After we've dealt with the reality of our heart, I'm telling you, you will actually see. Should deal with the heart of man. Now, here's a big cartoon. It's my favorite. Between the eyes of bitterness. Torah is our safeguard. Guy in the cartoon says, I hate being confined by this fence. I'm jumping over it. You see what the fence is, right? What it looks like a fence. The guy says, wait, it's not a fence. It's a guardrail. That is what Torah is. Torah is the thing that the Father has given to us. If we would just apply it, it guards our heart. That's what I'm telling you. Guard your heart with all. The King James Bible is determined with all diligence. Guard your heart with all diligence, because out of it comes the consequences of your life. You can't let the wrong thing in your heart. How do you guard it? You don't even have to come up with your own material to build it. All you got to do is take it, right? David said, I will hide your word in my heart that I will not sin against you. The defense mechanism to keep me from falling into that trap is getting your commands, getting your truth, getting your word in my heart, established in my heart, settled in my heart. Because again, if it gets in my heart, words and my actions reveal. So I've got to get the right thing in my heart. I want to set up this guardrail, because you know what happened when he jumped over the guardrail? He lost his life. Perspective is important, isn't it? Perspective on the Father's commands is important. Like, how do we see what the Father has instructed us to do? Oh, it's hard. I've studied a little bit, Brother John, and when I hear people talk about, oh, that stuff is hard, and all this stuff, the Torah stuff, that's hard. No, I read the passage that says the way of a transgressor is hard. But when I read as to what he says in Matthew chapter 11, oh, it's a yoke and it is a burden, but my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Oh, it's a yoke and it's a burden. The hardest thing is making up your mind to do it. That's the hardest part. The hardest part is denying your flesh and denying yourself to do what he says is right to do. What he said, I heard it a little around my head. What he said is right to do is only right for me and you. Right is always right. We get to the heart of the matter. It's impossible. We'll go to our last passage here, James. James. James 3, Yaakov 3. It's going to be our last passage today. Oh, goodness, it's so good. His word is so good. Oh, it's like giving, like changing. Yeah. James chapter 3. Let's look at verse number 7. Again, read the whole thing in context and read most of it. He says, for people have tamed and continue to tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures. But the tongue, no one can tame. It is an unstable and evil thing. Now, we just read in Proverbs, right, about the tongue of the righteous, fountain of life. Where's the righteous, right, life? But he says, there's an unstable and evil thing full of death-dealing poison. That's our own natural sin-influenced tongue, putrid, deceitful heart tongue. He says, with it we bless the Most High, the Father, and with it we curse people who were made in the image of the Most High. Out of the same mouth come blessing and cursing. Brothers, it isn't right for things to be this way. A spring does not send both fresh and bitter water from the same opening, does it? Can a fig tree yield olives, my brothers? Or a grapevine figs? Neither does salt water produce fresh water. I even recently learned something that blew my mind. They had an actual place that they went to the line of where the fresh water and the salt water meet and they don't mix. For you to deny the Father is real, something's got to be wrong. It says, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him demonstrate how? By his good way of life. By actions done in humility that grows out of wisdom, what we just got to talking about. But if you harbor in your hearts bitter jealousy and selfish ambition, don't boast and attack the truth with lies. Look at this, y'all. This wisdom is not the kind that comes down from above. This is not the kind of wisdom that comes down from above. On the contrary, it is worldly, unspiritual, and demonic. There is a such thing as worldly, unspiritual, and demonic wisdom. There is a such thing. There's a difference between the wisdom of the Most High and this wicked wisdom that comes out of the mind of man and his philosophies. For where there are jealousy and selfish ambition, there will be disharmony in every foul practice. Watch this, y'all. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure, then peaceful, kind, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy, and peacemakers who sow seed in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. Now that is so clear right there. Yaakov upholding and supporting the reality of what Torah is telling us anyway. That the wisdom that comes from above, this is how it acts, this is how it behaves. It is first of all, pure, peaceful, kind, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits. That's the wisdom that comes from above. That other stuff that stirs up the strife and the bitterness and the disputes, all these kind of different things like that's coming from some other place. No, I want to argue. I want to argue about it. Talk, reason, discuss, come to understanding, realize, grow, mature, develop. Yes. But argue, dispute, bicker? No. No. I'm convinced, Bertrand, that a lot of what we deal with is the reality of the lack of the fruit of spirit and more the works of the flesh. And we're dealing with the works of the flesh at some point in time. This flesh is going to clash. There's going to be a fight. There's going to be a battle, right? And then there's going to, somebody's going to try to come out as the victor, But the reality is that the Father is intended for us to be aware, cautious about what we allow to enter our heart. Very, very careful what we allow to enter our heart, because just like your natural heart pumps the blood, right, throughout your entire body, the influences what's happening throughout your entire body like that, keeps your blood flow going. Whatever's in the heart, whatever matter is in the heart will show forth in the life. So the best thing for me to do is not jump over this guardrail. The best thing for me to do is not jump over the guardrail. The best for me to do is always make sure that I understand that's not a fence. That's not to keep me from getting on the other side. That's to keep me from the danger that comes with crossing the line. Guardrails not made to sit on. To teeter-totter. To lean one way or lean the other way when I feel like it. No, that guardrail is there to make me aware that danger is on the other side. So I want to guard my heart with his commands and with his word. And I'm grateful for the instruction that Yeshua has given to us in what is called the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. That brings us to a reality of Yeshua coming to himself. And I said Matthew chapter 5, but if you really read the full thing in its entirety, it really will have been chapters then, but it really covers about 3 chapters, 5, 6, and 7, where he covers and goes through these different things, but he makes them aware. Don't think I have come to do away with the Torah and the prophets. I've come to fulfill. And as we said, when we talk about fulfill, even when you use the terminology, the end of, right? We say it is the end of the line, right? But you don't erase the line. Because if you erase the line, then you have the end of nothing. You have a start to the line, you have an end to the line, so you can have a whole line. So when Yeshua comes, and the line is being drawn by the Father, Yeshua comes, he completes it, then presents to us the fullness of the entirety of the Father's instructions through his life and through his demonstration, through his work, through what he left in his disciples to be carried to the uttermost parts of the world. We love him because he first loved us, and we love others because we have been loved. Amen. Father in heaven, thank you so much for your word, that your word takes root and produce fruit in us. We thank you. We give you glory and honor in Yeshua's name. Amen.
As we just give our offering, we just gonna give it in the bucket.